If you've been with me before, you'll remember from last year and probably the year before, this is one of my favorites. This is a story that was shared by Maurice Sendak, the children's illustrator. And he says, once a little boy sent me a charming card with little drawings on it. I loved it. I answer all my children's letters, sometimes very hastily, but this one I lingered over. I sent him a card and I drew a picture of a wild thing on it. I wrote, "Dear Jim, I loved your card." Then I got a letter back from his mother and she said, "Jim loved your card so much, he ate it." Now that to me was one of the highest compliments I've ever received. He didn't care that it was an original Maurice Sendak drawing or anything. He saw it, he loved it, he ate it. So the alchemy of joy, again, when we're understanding these different expressions of love, the alchemy of joy is not controlling. There's not the tension of controlling. Rather, there is a very open space that allows for the flow of life. And for those of you that were with us for the guided meditation, I recommend it for those that are listening on the podcast. It's very specifically, how do we contact that dynamic presence where there's openness, just letting the aliveness happen. It doesn't happen when we're controlling. And many of you might have heard this line from the poet Hafez. He's describing in a poem the difference between us and saints who are very filled with joy. And this is what he says. He says, "I'm afraid, my dear, you still think you have 1,000 serious moves." And doesn't that feel true? That we are going through our life and there's a sense of these important next steps, and then there's this and then there's that, and we're kind of plodding along. And also we add to that we're not doing it so well and that there's not enough time. And that just is a recipe for non-joy. Okay, so we'll look a little bit more closely now inwardly what gets between us and joy. And in Buddhist terminology, the near enemy that gets in the way of joy, it's just another expression of the shadow side, is attachment. And this isn't the healthy attachment bond between child and parent. This is the attachment where we're holding on. We want to keep something. We're not letting go. William Blake, I think, puts it most beautifully. He who binds to himself a joy does the winged life destroy. But he who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. So we're not conditioned to easy come and easy go. When there's something we like or want, there's a grasping. And the more we have unmet needs, the more tightly we'll grasp. And that blocks joy. So for instance, if there's a new romantic infatuation, that can set the stage for attachment that's masquerading as joy. And I remember last year a friend was in a new relationship, and she was really, really excited. But each step, she was aware of what was next, what had to happen for this necessarily to be the one. So there was that overlay of, I want it to be the one. So it made it very hard to just enjoy the unfolding process. When we have something we're grasping to, it's very hard to enjoy. And we know what it's like. I saw one little cartoon with a teen on a cell phone outside a restaurant. And she's saying, I can't decide which is more exciting, being with him or telling my friends about being with him. You know? So we know about the ways that the attachment gets in the way. You can sense it on a vacation. We have a narrative about how our vacation should be. And a lot of vacations are on our way to what's supposed to be the really fun moments, are on our way back from the fun moments, and some tension about making sure that they happen the way we want them to happen. There's a saying that a truly happy person is one who can enjoy the scenery on a detour. Isn't that so? I mean, how many times do we get tugged around and we're not, things aren't working the way we want them to work? And if in those moments we were able to say, oh, this too, this is the life too, we'd have a lot more of our step-by-step experiences of life included in our heart. The grasping is most obvious with food. Anybody that's a food addict, and that's a huge percentage of us, knows that there's a lot more moments that go into the craving, the fantasizing, and the obsessing, and the moving towards the food, or later the regretting of the food, than the actual moments where we're tasting and swallowing. In fact, usually when it's really something we like, we at most get the first 3 bites where we're somewhat mindful of the deliciousness, and then we kind of trance out. Check it out. It's really interesting. So again, you might think for yourself of something that where you really like or take pleasure in or want, and just start tracking how much are you really enjoying, and how much is the grasping around it getting in the way. How much is that attachment, the winged life destroys, Okay, the full shadow of joy is pushing away or resisting of enjoyment. It's the aversion to happiness. It's thatness which says no to life. And the metaphor might be that kind of keeping windows closed, not letting fresh air in because you expect a storm. It's like we're not letting the life move through us. And a lot of it, a lot of this full shadow expresses as cynicism. I'm very aware in myself and others a quality of, it can be kind of jadedness or been there, done that, or just slightly cynical. And usually it's because deep down we're cynical about ourselves. We're feeling disappointed in how our own ego is playing out. But then we're mistrustful and cynical of the world. And that really is toxic when it comes to the freedom to enjoy. There's a grimness. And there's several beliefs, and you can check yourself for these, that really get in the way of joy. And the most obvious one is that it's dangerous to relax and enjoy, because then something bad will happen. It'll get followed by a punishment. I almost am feeling like I wish I could do a hand raise, but I won't do that to you. Like, how many have that belief? But when we have that one, it's like keeping our guard up because we're unworthy or undeserving of enjoying. And if we dare to relax our guard, and this usually comes from some childhood experience where this really happened, following the good times will be something that will really be painful. So that's one of the beliefs. Another is that it's bad or wrong to relax. It's kind of like an ethical thing, that we're just a better person morally and ethically if we're always doing things. And William James talks about us being in this, and this is 180 years ago. He says we're in this relentless frenzy, always thinking we should be doing something else. Are some of you familiar with that one? That whatever you're doing, there's something else you really need to get to or should be doing? So it's bad or wrong to relax and be just with this. There's no time for the fresh air. Something will go wrong while we're loitering. Another belief is that I can't relax or open to presence because actually if I do, I'll get in touch with something really painful inside me. I think that maybe is one of the biggest, that as soon as we really begin to open to something, and I've had many people tell me this at retreats, when they begin to relax, there's this fear that kind of comes in, that there's something that they've been pushing away that they're going to get in touch with. And we sense that we, unless we keep busy and occupied, we might end up getting in touch with some real deep fear, our loneliness, our shame. So the understanding is that there's no joy possible if we keep defending against what's difficult. We really do have to make room for the 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. And Rilke, I think, says it really beautifully in one of his poems. He's talking to God, and he says this. He says, embody me. Flare up like flame and make big shadows I can move in. Let everything happen to you. Beauty and terror. Let everything happen to you. Beauty and terror. So there's a bigness. There's like this real courageous willingness to let that fresh air move through, not keep on controlling and manipulating the windows. Zorba, the Greek great example, talks about loving life. He says, am I not a man? And is a man not stupid? I'm a man, so I married. Wife, children, house, everything. The full catastrophe. Right? So that joy is that space of presence that includes the full aliveness. And as I mentioned, for me, it means the aliveness of a very, very deep sorrow right now in my life, and a very poignant loving, and all sorts of beauty. It's just really letting the mix live through us. So next part of this exploration is, let's look at how we actually entrain ourselves. How do we decondition from the ways that we kind of push away because it feels like life will be too much, or we get preoccupied? How do we train ourselves to open? And I have only time for this tonight, just go over 3 very powerful training elements, pieces that we can do, that if we did regularly, if we practice them, instead of practicing the kind of judgment or rehearsing or preparing that we usually practice in our mind, if we practice these, there would be a much more full-blown capacity for joy. And the 3 are, one is saying yes to the moment, no matter what it is, the beauty or the terror. The other is learning to savor or get familiar with moments of joy. And then the third has to do with possibility, sensing inherent in moments possibility. It's a very creative place to be aware of. So we start with saying yes. And this is our basic training in mindful awareness. This is, if there's anything we come back to exploring time and time again, I hope you're aware that it's how to come out of the thoughts and the trance and sense what's here, whether it's a feeling of excitement or happiness or curiosity or anxiety, and then agree to it, really let it be there. So in this one, we're starting right where we are. It's you sensing in your body and your heart right now what's here and agreeing to it. And if we agree deeply enough, because when I say saying yes, there are degrees of saying yes. If you're just doing a glancing attention at anxiety and saying, okay, yes to that anxiety, the presence is not going to be full enough to allow for that real space and aliveness. If there's a little more attention to anxiety and saying, yes, I'll be with you, but there's some sort of a bargaining, if you'll go away, and that's usually there because we don't like it so much, then there's a little more presence, but it's not full-blown. If we really say yes, and there's this curiosity and availability to feel it in our bodies. One of my friends, when he's describing anger, he says, let it rip. It's like, let it really be there. That fullness of presence taps us into the very space that joy emerges from. I'll share a rather recent example from my own life. As many of you know, I was, in January, spent 10 days on a silent retreat. And there were many moments of strong, unpleasant experiences that I was practicing, opening to, and then moments of beauty and peace or rapture I was opening to. One experience was more confused, and this was one that really required more deliberate choosing. Where I was practicing, as many retreat centers, has a strict protocol because a lot of people are there for long stretches of time. It gets very, very quiet and still. And so there's a lot of ways that we go out of our way to respect that with our silence and not talking and not writing notes to other people that are on the retreat. It's very slow and quiet and still there. So when Jonathan and I went and we knew we were going to be 10 days together, we knew that we were going to be in our own orbits and, we could in our hearts and minds send prayers to each other, but there wasn't going to be any contact. So I said goodbye to him, and he was in room 214 and I'm in room 201, and there was going to be no eye contact. We were ships passing and so on. 6 days in, I was, felt like a tiny bit of a scratch in my throat, and I found my emergencies. We both use emergencies when, on retreats if we need them. And I realized that I had a bunch of them, but I had like 4 or 5, hadn't given any to him. And then I started obsessing. It wouldn't hurt to just slip some emergencies under his door, and, it's a little love gift. And so finally I just got to that place where, yes, this would feel really good to share my emergencies with him. So I took 2 of my 5 emergencies and I put them under the door, and I was kind of was really being sneaky and made sure nobody was around. And then I got up and looked up and I realized it was the wrong door. So there there's probably some yogi that had been in there for a year, and all of a sudden he's seeing emergencies come under his... Oh, God. So I dashed back slowly to my room and got 2 more, went back to his room, looked at the number, put it under. Back in my room, I was this swirl of stuff, and there was a mix, part of me was like, I've broken the rules, I've done it now. Some yogis really disrupted and thrown into complete puzzlement. Samadhi's gone, So I felt kind of embarrassed and guilty because I've been going to retreats for a long time. I should be going by the rules, And but then there's another part of me that was feeling I only had 1 left, and I really was happy that Jonathan was going to have them. So I was feeling that. And then there's a part of me that thought it was all pretty funny. So I just said, okay, just let your body feel what it feels. And it just went through all this different stuff.